Hello. So here we are. We're going to be starting chapter 8 of Dragon Wings. So before we start chapter 8, just to kind of recap really fast what happened in 7, even though you did do a summary. Moonshadow gets beat up by the tenement boys next door. And remember, a tenement is kind of like an apartment building. Moonshadow and Windrider continue building gliders and eventually show Robin. Robin and Miss Whitlaw also help Moonshadow learn to read and write, and he tells them more about China and their types of dragons, which are definitely different than European or Western dragons. And you're actually going to be learning more about the different types of dragons this week, so stay tuned. And finally, Moonshadow writes to the Wright brothers asking for help. So here we are in chapter 8. I want you guys to follow along as I read. I'm not going to be reading the entire thing to you, but just part of it, okay? So, chapter 8 is called Earth, Wind, and Water. It takes place over 4 months' time from June to September in 1905. That was how our correspondence began with the Wrights. Orville seemed to handle all their letter writing. He wrote impersonal letters, not because he was not a friendly man, but because he was the kind of man who did not often display his own inner emotions. He answered any of Father's questions readily enough, and his answers were always prompt. At that time, few of their fellow demons believed that the Wrights had really flown. Most demons thought that the Wrights were humbugs. It was not until a few years later, when they flew their flying machine in another demon land, France, I think, that demons accepted flight as a fact. After Father got the first letter, he began to make larger glider models. They were mock-ups of the actual aeroplane with wingspans of up to 5 feet. There were extra strings that led to the various rudders. The idea was to let Father see for himself how the aeroplane flew. Short of going to the Wrights and letting them teach us on their actual flying machine, it was the only way of learning how to fly. Robin was all excited by the mock-up gliders my father built. "How does it fly?" she demanded of the latest model. "Like Dream," I said. "You ought to see it ride winds, like Cloud." "Yes, we should see it," Robin said firmly. "We'll have a picnic at the beach. We haven't had one in just ages." "What about your aunt?" I asked. "You leave my aunt to me," Robin said firmly. "What about your father?" "You leave him to me," I said. That Saturday we went on a picnic. The morning of Saturday, Father glanced at himself in the mirror. "I can't go out like that." On impulse, he searched through our trunk and took out a long red silk ribbon. "What's that?" I asked. "Your mother gave me this ribbon," Father said almost shyly. "The first year we were married." He dangled the ribbon. "She said it was to be my formal suit of clothes." He unbound his queue until his long hair hung down loose on his back. Then he recombed it and rebraided the queue, intertwining the red ribbon through the braids. So there's kind of, I marked it as CC for cultural connection there, just kind of talking about just a tradition that they have, with putting the ribbon through their queues or their braid in their hair. The red ribbon did make his hair look quite colorful, a little like the red lining around the scales of a black snake. Miss Whitlaw came out fresh and pert as a young girl on her first date. She wore the large kind of broad-brimmed hat that women wore in those days, which she tied down with a scarf that she had knotted underneath her chin. She had on a kind of little jacket over her blouse. Under her arm was a straw hamper. "I can't wait to see what you brought for our lunch," she said. "Neither can I," Father said, and explained that he had left all the buying up to me. We caught the streetcar to the park and part of the way toward Ocean Beach in the west. We walked along the sand dunes that seemed to stretch endlessly away on either side. To the north, we could hear the barking of seals from where they basked on Seal Rock. Robin and I went wading into the water, splashing one another. Then we had lunch. Miss Whitlaw had provided thick sandwiches with meat from a fat bird which the demons liked, a turkey, I think it was called. Inside the sandwiches, she had added slices of cranberry sauce as well as bread stuffing. I was barely able to get my mouth around one of them. There was also fresh lemonade, ginger snaps, fresh fruit, and nuts which we cracked between rocks. At the same time, I had brought along large meat-filled dumplings and other smaller pastries filled with various kinds of ground meat and shrimp. All of these I had bought in the Tang people's town that morning, and there was tea, of course. So I like this because I feel like the author's doing a nice job here of kind of showing how, again, the cultural connections here between what the Whitlaws brought to the picnic and then what the Lees brought to the picnic, and just how that's their food that they would have traditionally, and the sharing of those cultures and the acceptance of those cultures, which I think is really neat. Okay, I want you to finish reading chapter 8. After you're done reading chapter 8, you have 4 questions that you're going to answer that are about chapters 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. You really need to make sure that you're reading the questions carefully. Number 1 says, the family has mixed feelings about Black Dog and his addiction. Explain their feelings and why Moonshadow is reluctant to tell that Black Dog beat him. Number 2 says, use examples from the text from the first 5 paragraphs of chapter 4 to describe how Moonshadow is treated like a man instead of a boy, because he grows up a lot very quickly here once he eventually makes his way to America. Question 3 is, why is father upset about the letter from the Wright brothers? What does this tell you about cultural differences? And 4, why does Moonshadow go see Miss Whitlaw in his free time? Use textual evidence from the first 3 paragraphs of chapter 7 to support your answer. Just one quote. But please just make sure you're reading carefully and make sure to submit when you're done. Thanks.